top 10 takeaways. Woo! This is a terrible, terrible situation that we have here. A wide receiver that we were drafting in the 7th round, 6th round, and then we were drafting him in the 5th round, and then we're drafting him in the 4th round. If fantasy gamers understood how suspensions work in the NFL at any point this summer, he would have been a 2nd round pick all along. We had him. League-winning receiver. We had the league-winning running back in Aaron Jones, if not Alvin Kamara. Okay, maybe the 2nd league-winning running back. The 2nd most impactful running back drafted late, though it could end up being Brian Robinson of all people. So that's a question I actually have for Bradley Stalder, going to be joining me on the Mind of Mansion show. We're going live on Monday. So we have an early Mind of Mansion live program. Podcast will drop at its scheduled time. I'm excited to talk to Bradley. And one of the questions, spoiler alert, that I'm going to pose to Bradley is, so Bradley, which is the better B. Robinson? And so we talked about last year, Rachaad White outscoring Bijan Robinson against all odds, which is partly why we have this, lingering loyalty for Rachaad White that is continuing to be betrayed, which we will talk about later in the show. So that's one of our takes, one of the top 10 takeaways. I don't have an exact list of takeaways written down, but I'm going to rely on the chat, the live chat, to kind of track the takeaways, write them down, number 10, number 9, number 8, as I say them. So then when we get to the end, it's like, okay, we could have put a bow on this. We've got this. We've got the 10 takeaways because I want it to be accurate. Right? I don't like being inaccurate. I don't like having a show called Top 10 Takeaways. That's the name of the show. And then there's no tracking of the takeaways. Because it's not like Tyler and I have the ability to just, incrementally list the takeaways as we go. What do you think this is? Part of the eruption? You think we have a whole staff of millions of dollars of investment in a studio in Washington, D.C., where we can track every topic and tick them off as we go live? We probably could do that without spending much money, but we might look into it at some point. We don't have it now. I tried to make it sound like that was, which makes you wonder, where does all the money go? All the hundreds of millions of dollars that ESPN spends. Where does it really go? Is it necessary? You could essentially do a very similar program, and people do it every day in sports media on YouTube for a very, very small fraction of the cost of something like Pardon the Interruption. And then you also get a host who does not look like an unwrapped mummy. That's also one of the benefits of YouTube now. We don't just have this one thing, ESPN. When I was growing up, we had one choice, sports programming, one choice, ESPN, that was it. CNN tried to launch a sports channel and it failed, but it was just ESPN. I remember that. So Rashee Rice is very important to all of us. I know many of you have a lot of Rashee Rice. I mean, what percentage are we talking about? We're talking about 30% in our Underdog portfolios. Rashee Rice. I mean, it's so much. It boggled the mind throughout the summer that he was so available so late. And so in all these leagues, and we're talking about expert leagues. We're talking about leagues like the FSGA Expert League. We're talking about like the Kings Classic at the FF Expo, where Theo and I are looking at each other going, I guess we got to draft Rashee Rice, where I'm all ready to draft a running back. I'm ready to go running back. I have all my starting receivers plus all my flex positions stockpiled with wide receivers. The last thing I need is a wide receiver. I'm about to push the button on some dead zone back that's going to be great, like a lot of them were and have been. And they said, no, you're not allowed to draft a running back here. We're going to give you Rashee Rice in the 7th round. It's like, okay. And then he did it. He's climbing, top 10 in Dynasty. I mean, this just, it was such a great story. And then to see it all come crashing down in a literal, figurative, but literal, but figurative NFL car crash. I mean, this was the ultimate car crash play. Am I right? Can we look at it? Let's look at it. Let's look at it together. I don't want to look at it. Typically, I don't like to look. I'm one of those people that I look away. Whenever you have some gruesome injury, I always look away. I don't like to think about it because it makes me empathize with that person. And then what if I had that happen to me? I've had some gruesome injuries myself. Let's take a look. Okay, so this is what happened. So essentially, this is a double friendly fire situation. And this is very rare. This is very rare you ever see a double friendly fire situation. In fact, if anyone in the chat, the comments, wants to share another friendly fire situation that they remember in the history of the NFL, I'm all for it. Let's talk about it. He throws the interception, which leads to the torn ACL. But then he also is involved in the collision, which tears the ACL. But then it's also his shoulder, which does the tearing of the ACL. This is his go-to receiver. It's not Travis Kelce. And if you were drafting a lot of Travis Kelce early this year, then you don't know what you're doing, and you can tune out. I don't think there are that many people. I don't think many people were super overweight on Kelce anyway. And those that would listen to this show are predisposed to not draft tight end early, especially old dusty tight ends early. And we were all in on Rashee Rice with a little sprinkle of Xavier Worthy. So I think it's safe. It's one of those things where it's like, oh my God, he's saying something edgy. He's alienating potential members of his audience. Oh, you're not allowed to do that. You can't do that. People on YouTube don't do that. They're always pandering for listeners, pandering. Oh, you like the show. Subscribe. I know I'm supposed to say that, right? And then my producer's in my ear. Tyler's in my ear. You are supposed to do that, Podfather. That you are. Like, I know you're making fun of it, but that is what you're supposed to do. And I'm like, well, okay, I will next time. But, I forgot, right? How many shows have we done, live shows, where I forgot to say like and subscribe, share, whatever the fuck it is you're supposed to say? If I'm prompted by people in the chat or my producer, I will. If Tyler tells me to do it, I will do it. I obey. I obey the chat most of the time. Right? I walk around, talk like, I'm this rebel. I'm this edgy guy. No one can. I'm the boss. You can't tell me what to do. Right? I run Roto Underworld, which runs Fast Draft and Player Profiler, and I'm a big deal. I could do whatever I want. I don't have to pander for likes and reach. What do I care? Please like the show. Please subscribe. We're wearing all black today. I said, this is what we're doing. We're busting out the all black Roto Underworld hat and the all black shirt. And we're just going to pay homage to what would have been one of the great fantasy draft picks we've ever had. One of the great all-ins we've ever had on a particular player in a fantasy draft. Thankfully, we still have Aaron Jones. He's doing great for now. If something happens to Aaron Jones, right? Because remember, Aaron Jones was available sometimes the round after you were drafting Rashee Rice. In fact, I have teams where it went Rice, Aaron Jones. And so that was a thing that happened. People don't believe it, right? Alvin Kamara, 5th round is a thing. People have receipts. Rich Rebar talked all about it. Alvin Kamara is the guy you got to get. So between Rich and I, we did a show at the perfect time, early August. I was saying Aaron Jones. He was saying Alvin Kamara. We were both saying Rashee Rice, and you're welcome. You're welcome. Now, there was one player I was underweight on for systematic reasons, on principle, which was Nico Collins. And another of the top 10 takeaways is that Nico Collins has established himself as one of the throwback alphas in the mold of Mike Evans. He is a modern-day Mike Evans, a total throwback, 6'4", 220, hulking, contested catch monster that just goes up and wins in every situation, especially in the end zone. And because the collective ADPs of the Houston receivers made no sense, mathematically didn't make any sense, the system said, the math said you just have to be underweight on the most expensive of those guys, and that just happened to be Nico Collins, who also didn't do anything for his first 2 years. And so that's where we ended up with, 4% Nico? Is that what we ended up settling in on, 4% Nico? You couldn't put him on your do not draft list. I will say I was objecting to anyone putting him on the do not draft list because he can beat you. There are some players, especially the potential alpha on Houston, that's a player that can beat you. You could look up and go, I lost hundreds of thousands of dollars because I totally ignored this guy. At least we have 4%. At least. So that's the difference between a full fade and being, maximum underweight on a player that can beat you. Rashee Rice, man. This will also affect Mahomes. Mahomes now has to deal with the inconsistency of Travis Kelce. How is his body going to feel when he wakes up in the morning? Then he's got a rookie, very fast, and also not just a field stretcher, but Xavier Worthy was a target earner at Texas. So I think Xavier Worthy, his upside is whatever anyone is saying his upside is, I'm going to go with that. Like whatever the highest upside that anyone in the fantasy football content creation space is saying, whoever is at the maximum for Xavier Worthy upside, I agree with that person. That's what I'm going to go with. Xavier Worthy has maximum upside. I'm not here to say, well, be careful. He's a rookie and, he's never going to get a 20% target share. The guy could post a 25% target share because he's a fantastic route runner as well as having, world record breaking speed. He just happens to be a rookie and he wasn't going to ever be like a 1,500 yard receiver this year, but he could be at some point. Now we have no idea when Rashee Rice is going to be fully healthy. Is it going to be week 4 next year, week 5, week 6? At what point we're going to look up and go, okay, Rashee Rice is back to 100%. That's the thing. That is another takeaway before we move on. He's like, got to move on because this is a terrible, terrible topic to languish into. But he's not even going to be 100% at the beginning of next year, and his ADP will be rightly depressed in 2025, man. Damn it. Evan Ringler has a brand new show, Stat Masters. Search for it. Subscribe to it, Stat Masters. It's on the Player Profiler News channel. It's got its own podcast, Stat Masters, and he is going to be updating the Dynasty rankings this week, rerunning our 3-year projections, and it's not going to be pretty. It's not going to be pretty. I can tell you that I could break that news right now. It's going to be bad. The Malik Nabers concussion, also bad. Looked bad, but concussions can be worse than they look or less severe than they look. How it looks, you have no idea. You have no idea what's happening inside the brain. Even though it looks super dangerous what just happened. It could be that there's equal parts like neck strain as there is, brain colliding with the interior of the cranium. We don't know. So I'm holding out hope that Malik Nabers can actually play. I'm not saying that it was scary, but he can still play. He's got 10 days, and how it looked is not necessarily indicative of what the actual result was. I don't know what Malik Nabers' concussion history at LSU was either. So that's something else we can ask in the chat. Anyone that wants to, chime in live here, we will, either get worried about it or not. I'd rather, now that I'm thinking about it, I'd rather not know. I'd rather, if someone comes in and says, oh, he had 2 concussions at LSU, I'm like, oh, fucking shit. I don't know that, and I hope not. Let's not talk about the fact that all these guys get micro concussions all the time. Let's not talk about that either. That's not fun to talk about. That's, again, we're not here. There's good news. There's a lot of good news that happened. I mean, for Christ's sake, if you just want to look at my Scott Fishbowl team, 230 points. I took down Matthew Friedman. It beat you by 80, buddy. Though he has 3 guys to play. No, he still has Charbonnet, who's not starting. He still has Calvin Ridley and Jameson Williams. So there's a chance. It's not over. But it's over, right? It's over. And so this is a perfect example. I'll share this team. I'll share this team right now. This is it. This is the team. There it is, Aaron Jones. This is a 0 RB roster. This is a 0 RB roster in the context of a superflex format, which is also tight end premium, which is the only reason you're seeing Dalton Kincaid, right? Dalton Kincaid was a guy I was drafting in tight end premium. If it wasn't tight end premium, typically not drafting like a tight end anywhere close to meaningfully valuable ADP. So this is a great, and Brian Thomas on the bench. So we have Brian Thomas on the bench. I also haven't made any pickups this year, except one. I grabbed Carson Steele, and that's not working out. So Carson Steele fumbles, and then just inexplicably loses his job to Kareem Hunt, the dustiest of dusty running backs. He looked washed 3 years ago. What is happening? Carson Steele's an athlete. Carson Steele has power. And just because he's not a steely veteran, we're going to go ahead and banish him after one fumble? That's just rude. I don't understand that. That one. Because I know some of you started Carson Steele. I know I did in some leagues. I didn't in that particular league. Who knows why? I probably should have. But I was, am I really managing these teams very closely? No. But I just want to show people that when I talk about, hey, hero RB with a dead zone running back, that doesn't sound great. But then when you see the roster actually play out and it's Jefferson and Lamb and Nabers and Pickens and Brian Thomas, it's like, oh, wow, that's why you do that. Yeah. Those are the things you can do in Superflex. We talked about this with Superflex all the time. Is like Superflex is like you can do 0 RB on steroids with Superflex, because if you also punt the early round quarterback, which I did, and I'm just skating by with Lawrence and Deshaun Watson, I should have been all along aggressively trying to acquire a third quarterback. My third quarterback's Russell Wilson. It's just embarrassing. So what ultimately happens with these Scott Fishbowl teams is because I don't do much with in-season management and do the right thing, Deshaun Watson will have his contract voided and then I'm out, right? I'm done. So what I need to do, and you all can help me, is I'm going to focus this year. And we're going to get some back, because I have all these backup tight ends that are getting 0. Greg Dulcich, who cares? Got to go get a bunch of backup quarterbacks. And I'm going to try to win this Scott Fishbowl this year. We're going to do that. That's a takeaway. This year, I pledge to try to win the Scott Fishbowl. We're going to take it seriously. but I just like to show it as exemplary of, okay, here's me eating at my own restaurant. Here's me following my own advice. I'm not just saying, go do this super daring thing and punt running back into infinity and see what happens. You end up with Aaron Jones and Chuba Hubbard. That's a real league with people like Matthew Friedman. That's a very typical build. And as it turns out, I have a lot more Chuba Hubbard than Jerome Ford, though I wanted Ford, often was sniped on Ford, and this was a regular occurrence. Getting sniped on Ford and then settling for Chuba Hubbard. But now it's Andy Dalton to the rescue. Andy Dalton. We talked about this on the Starter Stream show. This is a great topic. How the quarterback change is disproportionately impactful for not the receivers. Often it's the running back. And I say disproportional because very few people appreciate just how a quarterback upgrade can unlock a running back. It means more drives, more sustained series. So now there's just more volume. There's more opportunity overall. You have more of the football when you have Andy Dalton. I mean, Andy Dalton, that he's unlocking Chuba Hubbard is hilarious. It's hilarious. It's also hilarious because Chuba Hubbard went to Oklahoma State, and I believe the Oklahoma State Cowboys have an orange rifle in their logo. I believe. We could look that up. Check me on that. But there is an orange rifle. So I think that Chuba has some affinity from college for Andy Dalton, because we have to talk about every show. We got to talk about somehow work in Andy Dalton's orange hair. That has to be a topic of conversation because he was once a Bengal and his hair matched his helmet, and it was just very cool. It was a very elegant aesthetic, something I'll always appreciate about Andy Dalton. And unlocking all my Chuba Hubbard, I mean, thank you. Thank you. I think Chuba and Roschon were my two most rostered running backs, just because those were, especially in seasonal leagues, managed leagues, you're just grabbing all the running backs you can at the end and just piling them up on your bench. And sure enough, there's Roschon. Oh, there's Chuba Hubbard. Roschon coming in this week and getting all of the other carries that DeAndre Swift wasn't getting. No Khalil Herbert this week. That was very cool to see. You can see Roschon, what's happening below the surface, where Roschon's getting, 11 fantasy points? Who cares, right? But below the surface, he is solidifying a bell cow role in waiting. That's what Roschon is. Gets the touchdown. I know they're just milking clock. It was a breather back touchdown. They happen. But the DeAndre Swift exit from Chicago is going to happen one way or the other, whether it's personality driven, whether it's health driven, performance driven. He's going to fail in Chicago. Sooner rather than later, there will be a good game here and there. DeAndre Swift's allowed to have a good game. Congratulations. You had a good game. I mean, you give a guy 70% usage every week, he's going to have a good game eventually. But we are Team Roschon. And I have the noisemaker. I have the party noisemaker. Various party noisemakers. Right? I mean, I have them ready. You know what's going to happen. When the Roschon breakout happens again, because he broke out last year with, 40 plus catches, but no one remembers, no one cares. When he breaks out a second time in a much more epic fashion, where everyone is running to their waiver wire and wondering where he is, we'll be here. We'll be here with noisemakers and dance music, and it's going to be great. It's going to be great. In the meantime, I mean, it's just, this is the week to wear black. We have a Malik Nabers concussion, and we have a Rashee Rice torn ACL. Bijan Robinson's fumbling and getting relegated. Bijan? It's crazy. It's interesting also that Same carry share between Bijan and Tyler Algier in a close game, right? And no one's worried about Bijan yet. I am. I've been worried about Bijan. I'm not as worried about Bijan as I am Breece Hall. Breece Hall, this is a real red alert situation. All summer, we talked about who you're drafting in the first round, and that I just couldn't push the button on these running backs. I understood. I get the fascination with Breece Hall and Bijan Robinson. I never got the fascination with Christian McCaffrey because it's like, I'm not drafting for 2023. What are you doing? He's going to pay the price for 2023 this year. Don't do it. But even still, if I have access to everyone from CeeDee Lamb through A.J. Brown, what am I doing drafting a running back when in the second round you see Jonathan Taylor leak into there, you see Saquon Barkley leak into there, and you also have, Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry just went off for 200 yards in like a conference grudge match, AFC conference grudge match, clash of the AFC Titans, and Derrick Henry just whipped out his penis, put it on the table, and said, "Hey, Josh Allen, you're gonna have to take this. This is an L. You have to take this L. All right? I know it's not gonna feel good, but you're gonna take this L, Josh. I'm sorry. I'm not sorry. We're gonna do this. We're gonna run this thing down just like a train." Awesome to see. Awesome. And I'm so happy for Barstool Joe. Barstool Joe, Saquon got there again for him, and Derrick Henry. Remember, Barstool Joe was like, listen, guys, let me get this straight. So Derrick Henry landed in the absolute nuts. Phrasing. And so did Saquon Barkley. Oh, but the tush push. Oh, okay. And we were not drafting him in the first round? What happened? You know, Derrick Henry barely played early in his career. He's not dust at all. There's been no signs of that. Can't I just draft this guy in the second round all the time? And I'm like, sure, yeah, why not? Yeah, dude, Barstool Joe, I trust your logic. 1-2 turn, Saquon every time. Sure, yeah. You could do the Eagles stack. There's some teams I saw with A.J. Brown, and then they come right back with Saquon Barkley. Pretty sexy stuff. I did my bestie. I did not do that. Those are out there, especially on Underdog. Those are out there. And, we should talk a little bit more about Underdog here. Let's talk about it. Say what you want about fantasy football. You can't say it's not a game of skill. My favorite game of skill during the NFL season, these Underdog pick'em contests. You pick 6, you can win 100 extra payout. Just pick a game, just one game. Stack that game. Think week 1, Vikings-Giants. Joe Schoen, he doesn't know what he's doing. I watched Hard Knocks. Daniel Jones is what we thought he was. Less than on Daniel Jones. Less than on Malik Nabers. Less than on Devin Singletary. And, Sam Darnold, better than advertised. Sam Darnold, more than. Justin Jefferson, more than. Aaron Jones, more than. Boom, 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 boom. 100 extra payout on Underdog right now. Use promo code Underworld. You get a 50% deposit bonus up to $250. So they've raised the maximum bonus from $100 to $125. You put in $250, you get $125 in bonus cash. Who doesn't love that with promo code Underworld? Now go start picking. A.J. Brown, Barkley, you're fine. You're actually fine. A.J. Brown's going to be back. Barkley has more than delivered. You can weather this A.J. Brown injury period. And then when A.J. Brown comes back on a per-game basis, this guy with his target share, his air yard share, just his production, he's a true proper alpha. Drafted 1 or 2 spots after him it got really, really tricky. Really tricky. And that was the whole case for Saquon Barkley and Jonathan Taylor. Now, Jonathan Taylor has not been Saquon Barkley level, and now he has this injured ankle. And it's the same ankle he's injured already 3 times. So this is not necessarily a high ankle sprain, but the low ankle sprains, if you continue to sprain it over and over and over again, the ligament gets stretched. Because this is a moment that we should discuss the difference between low ankle and high ankle sprains. They're not in any way related. A low ankle sprain is nothing like a high ankle sprain. They shouldn't even be so closely labeled. They're way too closely labeled. A high ankle sprain is actually a micro fracture of the lower tibula and fibula bones down where they meet and they connect with the ankle joint. That gets pulled and cracked when you see the leg going in the wrong direction. Most of the time, it's when an ankle or a back of a leg gets rolled up on, or you see like the hip drop tackle that a Joe Mixon suffered. So it is actually a pain tolerance issue, where it is the type of injury where mobility-wise, you're the joint is still intact, but the bone needs to heal, and it's just so painful because you're putting weight on the tip of a bone that has now been cracked and or chipped, and it is insanely painful. But again, because it's not as structural as, like, a torn ligament, you can conceivably play on it. And so what happens is these players that have this adrenaline pumping through their bodies during a game, they will suffer a high ankle sprain. They will come back into the game and they will play on it, not realizing the severity of it until after the game. Then all of a sudden it swells way up and it becomes something that is excruciatingly painful. And they're like, wait, I can't put weight on this. How the hell did I even play? And it's like adrenaline, man. It's crazy. A lower ankle sprain is nothing like that. A lower ankle sprain is where there's all these ligaments are connecting the ankle and the bone. There's a whole spider web of ligaments, and any one of those ligaments can get stretched because the foot gets twisted the wrong direction or over twisted in the right direction. Either way, some of those ankle ligaments get pulled, and that's a lower ankle injury. That's actually technically more structural than the high ankle sprain, but the pain tolerance and the necessary healing that is required is like weeks of difference. And the thing is, these guys come back from these high ankle sprains. The reason we call it high ankle fucked, okay, the reason why it's called high ankle fucked is because all they're waiting on is pain, the pain to diminish. With a lower ankle sprain, you're just waiting for the strength and the mobility to come back and to be able to move your foot around 360 degrees. You're like, okay, and push off of it. Okay, I think I'm good, right? Anyone that's played basketball at all has had lower ankle sprains. They happen all the time, okay? And you sit out a couple weeks, you're back, and you move on. The ligament tightens up, and you're good, right? This is what keeps happening to Jonathan Taylor. So it's not a long-term injury. And a lot of basketball players have suffered like 50 lower ankle injuries in their life. And it will snap back. I mean, a little less every time, but it's frustrating for Jonathan Taylor. It's possible he misses this week because of this ankle injury. It's very possible. And to have no Anthony Richardson and possibly no Jonathan Taylor, finally, we'll be able to start Michael Pittman with some confidence if that's how it plays out. You get Michael Pittman will be the must start. Be like George Pickens. And George Pickens, an incredible process play, didn't get the touchdown, but there hasn't been a better process play than George Pickens all year, who just didn't happen to deliver the touchdown. So congratulations if you played George Pickens, you did the right thing, you got your 17 fantasy points. It could have been a nuclear game though. This guy is just eating air yards shares for breakfast. He's shitting target share. He is snacking on contested catch. I mean, this guy, he's one of the reasons why Player Profiler exists is George Pickens. Unbelievable. So Jonathan Taylor might miss a game and come back. And again, he's just more susceptible to this happening and then missing another game, but not something that you should be concerned with long-term. Not something that I, am now shopping Jonathan Taylor in Dynasty. No. Just, he might miss a game. Most primary backs miss a game or two during the year. And this is a classic example of a situation where he might do that because he has some ligament damage in that lower ankle. And, it's been something that has plagued him just out of random chance. And there's some long-term weakening, slight weakening to that area. Fine. He's gonna miss a game maybe. Joe Mixon is a different situation. Joe Mixon, like I said, if they just numb that area, he could conceivably play on it. But, and you see this in the Super Bowl, guys with high ankle sprains, they will play in the Super Bowl. And then what will happen is while they're playing on that tibia and fibula that's lost some of its integrity, it'll crack more and break more pieces off. Micro pieces will break off. And then they'll have to have the cleanup surgery, the arthroscopic surgery. They'll have to go in after the Super Bowl and clean it up. And then it's like a 3-month recovery. That's the price you pay to shoot that thing up, that high ankle up, and go play for a game. You can do that, but you're going to suffer the consequences. And it's impossible to really be 100% after a high ankle sprain until months later. It's high ankle fucked for that reason. It takes it's basically like a broken bone, but you can play on it after 2 or 3 weeks. The pain tolerance gets to a point where, okay, I can play on this thing, and it has enough integrity. It's not going to continue to chip more and break more pieces away. It just hurts, right? And you can't push off with the same ferocity. If you watch the Premier League, if you watch soccer, and the camera is at the top of the stadium, right? And they're zooming in a little bit. And they're kicking the ball around. But this field is bigger than a football field. It's much bigger than an NFL football field. And how these soccer players can just kick the ball back and forth, across, up and down, it looks so elegant and easy for them. But when they actually put the camera down at the field level, you can hear the impact of the foot on the ball on just a what looks to be an easy standard pass from above. There's actually a violent collision with the foot and the ball that's happening. And that's the thing. When these professional athletes are running a football and cutting back and moving a pile, the violent push and explosion that has to happen in the lower body, and then where the rubber meets the road is where the foot hits the turf and then the ankle is holding that in place. A high ankle sprain that's even a month old is still going to, resonate pain from that area, and you're just not going to be able to push off and not be able to run as violently and not be able to cut as effectively for 2 months is really what it is. Back in 3 weeks, not yourself for 2 months. That's what a high ankle is. I just want to remind everyone with Joe Mixon, I just want to remind everybody what we're talking about here, right? And whenever there's a new high ankle sprain, because every week, there's a new high ankle, right? So who got the high ankle this week? It's Christian Watson. Okay, so that's a really long story. What are you, a doctor? No, but I've had a lot of injuries, and I've talked to a lot of orthopedic surgeons, and I remember stuff. This was all to say Dontayvion Wicks is someone that is going to be very, very productive moving forward, as is Jaden Reed, as is Romeo Doubs, as is, yes, I am going to say it, Bo Melton. But Wicks for sure. And it's not just because, he got all the targets, right? Double-digit targets for Wicks. Your point chasing last week. This guy was a backup, though everyone was drafting him like the 15th round at Underdog. Now it's paying off, right? You drafted him just in case. Turns out, he's better than Romeo Doubs, which isn't a leap. Or Christian Watson gets injured. That was the thesis for Dontayvion Wicks. And now all those things are true. He is better than Romeo Doubs. Wicks and Melton are better than Doubs. And Christian Watson's injured, and he's not going to be himself, okay? He will not be himself until early December. After everything we just talked about with how the mechanics of treating and healing a high ankle sprain and how it works and how it impacts athletic achievement. So Wicks will be worth at least a 10% bid in your fab. I try to hold the line, man. I try to hold the line and not overspend on wide receiver bidding. And every week, I look in my inbox, podfather@rotounderworld.com. I look in the chat, and no thank yous. I never get a thank you for this. I told you to bid whatever it is, like a nominal amount. I don't remember what it was, 5 to 10% on Brandon Cooks. Whereas others were saying you got to put like 20%. Cooks is back. Dak. Cowboys. How about them Cowboys? Yeehaw! Right? And I was like, no. This is a wide receiver. No. We don't spend fab on wide receivers. It's not what we do. We've saved it for running backs. You're always saving it for the next Jordan Mason. Always and forever. That's what you're doing. Spending it on Jordan Mason. Fuck Brandon Cooks. I like Brandon Cooks. He's a great guy. Also has dealt with some high ankle sprains, concussions, all the things we've talked about today. Everything, whatever, he can empathize with Christian Watson and Malik Nabers and everybody. Hamstring injuries as a Saint. Chris Olave. Chris Olave also pulled up during that game. Anyone else see that? Anyone else see Olave pull up? Will Olave play this week? I'm going to guess no. It's a game time decision. Potential re-aggravation in week 4. Will he play week 5? Don't need him. Especially if A.T. Perry's healthy. Why do I do that? Why? It's trolling R.C. Fisher. Don't do that. So, Rashid Shaheed and Khalil Shakir. I mean, this is that's a lot of silent H's and rhyming words that you can string together. That's tough. But again, I'm a professional broadcaster. I can roll lots of syllables together, rhyme them, and they sound great. Rashid Shaheed, Khalil Shakir. And then there's also Shakira, right? So that I always hear Shakira in my head because it's like a dance party every week with Shaheed and Shakir, who we were way out in front on. Way out on our season rankings all summer and weekly rankings so far this year on both. And I'm very proud of that. Very proud. And it's just going to be more of the same, more of the same, more of the same. So because of this hamstring injury and because Rashid Shaheed is so damn good, and he was great in college, he just went to a small school. He was a phenomenal mega producer in college at the wide receiver position. Like a small school Xavier Worthy is really what he was. And somehow falls through the cracks of the scouting industrial complex and goes undrafted, and then the Saints end up with him, and now it's like he is discount Tyreek Hill. That's really what I said it. I said it. He's a lot better than A.T. Perry. Sorry, RC. So there were a handful of late round receivers that hit, and these guys are mostly in best ball. Now, I stopped drafting receiver at that line, that Shakir Shaheed line. They went about the similar ADP in seasonal leagues. That was where we stopped drafting receivers, and then all running backs after that. So I ended up with a fair amount of Shakir. Brian Thomas was also in that ADP range, right? So there's been a handful of receivers that have really delivered from that particular ADP range, and that's either because they were just phenomenally efficient, like Rashid Shaheed, or they had like the number one receiver job locked up as of June, and no one appreciated it. Like, I'm eventually going to get one of these names wrong. There's just Khalil Shakir. I'm not so far. I'm good. We got to get a Shakira song so that we can get really line up some rhyming with this, and dance parties. So that'll be great. So that was a real fertile zone of the ADPs right there. That Brian Thomas, Shaheed, Shakir area. Very, very profitable for best ball. And hopefully the way you structured your teams was that in best ball, hey, I got to fill a couple more of these wide receiver spots. Bang, bang, bang. Right? So in best ball, you're teeing it up so that you finish your draft just on a total wide receiver run and try to load up as many of the Shaheeds and Shakirs as you can. And then in seasonal managed leagues, it's like that's one of those guys is your last receiver, and then you're not going to draft another one after that. There's going to be no Jalen McMillans. There's going to be no Darnell Mooney's. There's going to be no Jalen Tolberts. Somehow the back of your managed league benches, those are best ball only play. Not better in best ball. All those receivers only in best ball. Only in best ball. Only in best ball. But the line was Brian Thomas, Shaheed, Shakir. We've only talked about technically two of the games. Dallas, New York, New Orleans, Atlanta. And we are 48 minutes in. Whoa. This is officially the least efficient show I've ever done. And what's disorienting to me is I haven't even engaged with the chat yet. We haven't even talked about the chat. This is unbelievable. Brian, here it is. Let's go to the first thing in the chat. Let's look at it. Let's look it up. Brian Masenzo. Brian Masenzo's in the chat. Welcome, Brian. Brian's listening on YouTube. We have others on Twitch and Facebook, and we're also on Instagram Live. And so we have a bunch of people on Instagram Live coming in. Hey, Instagram Live. Caleb Williams is a bust. Slow down. Okay. I remember Jared Goff. So everyone that's saying Caleb Williams is a bust, just go look up the Jared Goff, please. And they both went to college in Los Angeles in the Pac-10, Pac-12, whatever it was at the time. Go look it up. Go look up Jared Goff, Rams rookie season. And you tell me. You tell me if it's over for Caleb Williams. Get out of here. Get out of here. if there was ever a week to just play whatever Bengals running back you happen to have, and I admittedly had a little more Zach Moss than Chase Brown. Zach Moss was more effective in the receiving game and also had more carries, or the same number of carries. He had more carries in the first half. And they really leaned on Chase Brown. They said, we just want to give Chase Brown as much experience as we possibly can. This is the perfect time to do it. Sitting on a lead against Carolina. Let's go. Diontae Johnson, Andy Dalton, hero for our time. Just a hero. And yes, it's okay if you're underweight on Nico Collins. Please don't be mad at me because you're overweight on Malik Nabers and Deontay Johnson and Chris Godwin, and Ladd McConkey is looking like Ladd McConkey's getting there. And on the Starter Stream show Sunday morning, I laughed at the possibility of starting Quentin Johnston. I said, we don't do that. This is not something that we do, us, together, right? I know there might be a few people that are tuning in for the first time. Hey, I found this podcast on Apple. Looks kind of interesting. Who the hell is this guy? He's really full of shit. It's like, well, maybe. Just keep listening. And it's just mockable. Like low volume offense, injured quarterback, and he's not the primary option. He's been luck boxing touchdowns. You don't chase touchdowns. This is not what we do. We go right back to Ladd McConkey, and that worked out. Quentin Johnston did not. So good. So we made up for it, right? You make up for it by hitting on other receivers later that were arguably, at the time, much better values. Now it's impossible to say that anyone's better than Nico Collins. It's like, But this week we had 4 lock buttons. This was the hardest week. I have my lock button receiver. I put it on TikTok. 2 weeks ago, it was Rome Odunze, which was bold, and it paid off. This week, I went back to chalk mode. I went back to George Pickens. That was the lock button. But I had a lot of choices. Deontay Johnson, great lock button. We had Terry McLaurin, was a total lock button. And then also Christian Kirk was a lock button. It's like Christian Kirk is still the primary option. I want to believe that Christian Kirk doesn't exist because I love Brian Thomas so much. I want to believe that Ladd McConkey doesn't exist because I now back into Quentin Johnston. But that's not how it works, right? Oh, I'm fascinated by wide receiver X on Washington. No. It's all about Deontay Johnson in Carolina. It's all about Terry McLaurin in Washington. It's all about Christian Kirk and now Brian Thomas in Jacksonville, and it's all about George Pickens. So this was a Christian Kirk week, right? Christian Kirk. So in hindsight, we did talk about this. You got to go back to a guy like Christian Kirk. It's just, slow start. That's just wide receiver variance. Against the Texans, it was the perfect process play for Kirk. Perfect process play for McLaurin. McLaurin is 29. He has been waiting for this quarterback his whole life. He finally gets there. They've let go of everyone else that could possibly compete for targets with him. It's just him. And you're shocked when he gets there week after week? Remember when the Dotson trade happened, his ADP crept up like half a round, even on Underdog, which was shocking and just an inefficiency in the marketplace that we took advantage of. Jaden Reed also. That whole area. Think about that ADP zone from Jaden Reed to Terry McLaurin to George Pickens. It was unbelievable. And you go right into Deontay Johnson, right into Chris Godwin, right into Christian Kirk. Fertile wide receiver soil, right? But guess where the wide receivers are busting from? Oh, the second round. That's where you were getting your hero running back. So the builds are paying off. And I know that there's a problem in Tampa. Rachaad White coming in garbage time, right? It's like, oh, they had the same exact line. Well, not really. One guy was called upon at the goal line when the game mattered. One guy was called upon when the game was out of reach. And they had the same efficiency numbers at the end and the same total yards and the same everything, same exact box score except the touchdown. But, yeah, the coaching staff souring on Rachaad White after what he did for them last year is one of the most surprising things in my history in this business. I did not think that would happen. I think I've got NFL coaches figured out, and then they go do something that just has never been seen before. You just don't see this. You don't see this. Even a Shanahan or a Shanahan disciple would not do this with Bucky Irving. It's just shocking. It took Shanahan years to unlock Raheem Mostert. Talking about day 3 pick. You have a workhorse, established workhorse, who was drafted earlier, who has the profile of an every down back in Rachaad White. It's shocking that even in the face of the rushing inefficiency that Tampa would make this move so early. Now, again, fortunately, based on how builds aligned, I checked all my rosters, and actually, because of these co-manager teams I have with Theo, and he was so in on Bucky Irving, props to Theo, I have more Bucky Irving than Rachaad White. So, turns out, for all the same reasons, wasn't drafting Christian McCaffrey, because this isn't 2023. Also, not drafting Rachaad White. Turns out 2023 was the year to have Rachaad White. I still will be a Rachaad White apologist. I'm loyal to R.C. Fisher, and I also just love players like Rachaad White that are super active out of the passing game, out of the backfield. And I just don't understand how they can be so dismissed by fantasy gamers, because Rachaad White's not going anywhere. He still was more productive in the passing game again. And he will be again and again and again and again. But if it were me and I'm an NFL coach and I have the opportunity to play an explosive satellite back and give him carries, I would do it. Right? That's the thing. I would run Devon Achane until the wheels fall off. I'm going to ride whatever little explosive back, Jaleel McLaughlin. If I had a Jaleel McLaughlin on my roster with a Tyler Beatty, Javonte Williams would get no carries if I were running the team, because I don't have this big back bias that seemingly every NFL coach does. Well, every NFL coach except the coach of Tampa. That's what we've learned. So good for him. He's somehow extinguished that bias. I mean, I didn't see that coming. Todd Bowles, good for you, man. Dave Canales, good for you. They're doing great, right? I guess we're going to see head coach Dave Canales, aren't we? Yeah, we are. Yeah, we're going to see head coach Dave Canales. We're going to see the Peter principle in action. We have the Buccaneers with Baker Mayfield doubling up Jalen Hurts. That is the recipe, if I've ever seen one, for, equity holder X at some franchise to say, okay, our next coach is whoever the offensive coordinator is over there in Tampa. They're doing something special. And then they bring him in, and he's Doug Peterson. And you're like, what happened to the Philly special? It's like, well, they're different jobs. Leader of men versus whiteboard stuff. So that's a takeaway. Dave Canales will be the first coordinator hired by an NFL team. He's going to be the it coordinator this offseason or even before. I don't know. It depends on where the Buccaneers finish, but they're 3-1. So they're not going anywhere. Falcons are 2-2. Saints are 2-2. Wow, at the beginning of the year, after week 1, we look up, we say, oh, Buccaneers are leading this division. Turns out this is a very competitive division. Obviously, there's a problem with it. There's the Carolina Panthers or the fly in the ointment, but other than them, wow. Who knew? This is a very competitive division. Good for them. That's great. That's a takeaway. In the chat, where are we at? Are we at 10 yet? I feel like I have 10. Oh, here we go. Someone's counting. Wow. Okay. Apparently we're at 27 takeaways. I did not realize that. We're also at the hour mark of the show. So we're averaging about one meaningful takeaway every 2 minutes. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. Okay. So again, if you were going with a different type of build than we were, if you were drafting running back in round 4, which based on all the receivers that were available, that was a tough pill, but you might have done that, and you have Rachaad White, don't feel bad. Don't feel bad. It was not easy to see this coming. Okay? No matter how, even if you are the most raging Oregon Ducks fan of all time, I just think it would have been tough to imagine. But the first half versus second half usage is like, eek! For Bucky Irving versus Rachaad White. Though the box score ended up being hilariously even. Not buying it. Not buying it. They're gonna be. It's all about running Irving and targeting White. And that's fine. I would do the same thing. Rachaad White reminds me of a guy named Chris Brown. Chris Brown was a running back from Northwestern. He had some productive years in Tennessee. His problem was that he was 6 foot tall and that you can't be super elusive at 6 feet. You can't do it. You're too lanky. You're too tall. You can't move laterally. It's physically impossible to move laterally the way that a more stout running back can. And that's been Rachaad White's issue his whole career. But when you get him out in space, he's a phenomenal receiver. He looks like a receiver playing running back, so that's how they're playing him. This makes sense. And then you take the smaller guy and actually you play him like a grinder back. You take the big back and you play him like one of these scat backs. So that's what it is. Rachaad White's now the biggest scat back in the league. It's fucking crazy. And I don't have a horse in the race, thankfully. Drafting wide receivers there. Juwan Jennings, by the way. Hey, you weren't starting him, but you could have, right? Deep leagues, you could have started him, right? Gave you 88 yards. I just love Juwan Jennings. I love these lunch pail wide receivers. They block. They put the work in. They get no hype at all. Even fantasy gamers coming off 3 touchdowns are like, bye, I'm dropping you. And if you drop Juwan Jennings, it's brave, kind of, but it is logical. Like, okay, I dropped him. Okay, I dropped him. I'm saying that because I dropped him. And it was the right process. Just like starting Pickens and expecting 30 points was the right process, dropping Juwan Jennings with the return of Deebo Samuel was the right process. Now the question is, what's going on with Brandon Aiyuk? And he should be back up and running by now. Any week he's gonna go nuclear. So low owned DFS option with upside, that is Brandon Aiyuk. So I think that I foresee, we'll look in my crystal, I'm going to close my eyes. And I'm going to imagine a DFS grinder expert guy talking every week about, okay, you got to play Brandon Aiyuk. You got to have double the rostership for Brandon Aiyuk over the field. I believe that's going to be a tactic that some of the top DFS experts will tell me. Let me know in a future show. Email me. You could tweet me at fantasy_mansion. Did you hear that advice from DFS Grinder X, who is in the maxing out the Millie Maker, and he finished top 10 at some point, and it's in his bio now, and he's doing great. So let me know. Let me know. Also, it's not just about Michael Pittman. If we see Jonathan Taylor out, if we see Anthony Richardson out, then it's going to be Josh Downs as well, right? I will never play Josh Downs in a fantasy. I promise you this. As long as Anthony Richardson is the quarterback, I will never draft Josh Downs. He was a stay away player. He was a do not draft list player. And I would never play him with Anthony Richardson under center. If it's Joe Flacco, I'm in. I'm so in on Josh Downs, playing him. And no Jonathan Taylor, playing him even more. And it is sad. Whenever I go and I put the stashes, because on Patreon, patreon.com, I put my patreon.com/podfather. I put my fab guidance for all my leagues. Hey, here's what I'm bidding on player X, player Y, player Z. And then at the end, I put stashes. If you can just pick them up without bidding, I put the stashes in there. Now, I did put like a 1% bid on Guerendo because I think at Guerendo, he's not just another stash. He's a special guy you want to get. Because Christian McCaffrey now is going to Germany and coming back. And it's like, oh, what happened in Germany? Well, Trey Sermon added to the stash list last week because you have to. You have to go down through these rosters and say, oh, what happens if, 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 what happens if. Problem with like a guy like Gainwell is it's going to be a split, right? It's not just going to be Gainwell, right? They get Will Shipley. So you're not just going to get a whole bunch of Gainwell, just assuming all of these Barkley touches. It's not going to happen. We know that. But Trey Sermon, those are the situations where you stash a guy prior to Sunday thinking, well, if the worst happens that we don't want to happen, but if it does happen, Trey Sermon is a potential 25 carry guy. And that's something to look out for. Hopefully Jonathan Taylor plays. Hopefully it's a very minor ankle injury. I don't love it. Hopefully Chris Olave, hamstring, fine. Oh, I'll tell you this right now. I'll predict this. Olave's not practicing on Wednesday. That I know for sure. No Olave on Wednesday. That I can predict with absolute certainty. Anyone wants to bet me on that, we'll do a bet. The Saints play Monday night. So they might not have practice Wednesday anyway. I'll do this. Because they play on Monday night, Olave doesn't practice Thursday. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. Overall, this week was a dark week with one of the worst injuries that we could have ever imagined, that Patrick Mahomes would actually take out his own alpha receiver. I have been monitoring the chat. No one can come up with a situation where that this has ever had a double friendly fire injury like this before. It's super sad. And hopefully Nabers is okay. We're going to be monitoring this closely. I mean, I'm just every 30 minutes just querying. Nabers. Hopefully he's back. Hopefully Jonathan Taylor's back. Hopefully Olave's back. Otherwise, not very many injuries this week. We had just a Christian Watson injury, but that is going to unlock Wicks. I have to decide whether we're going to break the glass and actually bid more than 10% this week on Wicks. You're going to find out on Patreon, and I'll talk about it on the Mind of Mansion show, but it's a big question I have. If there ever was a time to do it, it would be Wicks. But then I also like Bo Melton. Don't respect Romeo Doubs. He's the worst receiver they have on the roster. And have you noticed that as opportunities open up, that Doubs does not seize them, that he is at his maximum ability to command targets, even though he's got the most snaps on the team? He's running the most routes, but he's not earning the targets. It's because he's not any good. Wicks is pretty good. Bo Melton's pretty good. So this is exciting. What we're going to do is the classic thing. Okay. I just decided what we're going to do. We're going to go ahead and not overreact to 13 whatever number of targets Wicks commanded last week. Some absurd number of targets. We're not going to overreact. We know that they're going to go back to practice and they're going to drop some new plays without Christian Watson. And Bo Melton's going to have a bigger role next week than he did this past week. And the way variance works is that there's no way Wicks can repeat last week. So for that reason, we're probably going to put in a minimum bid, a maximum/minimum bid. So the maximum bid for us, 10% on a receiver, would be the minimum that you would ever need to get that guy in any other league. So we're not going to get any Wicks this week. But we're going to put in those little micro bids on Bo Melton. So that is what I predict is going to happen. We're going to wake up on Wednesday and Thursday, and we're all going to have a lot of Melton. We're going to miss on Wicks. But this is the life that we have chosen. Hey, I want to take a moment to thank you for tuning in. It's important to me that all of our media be free. This is only possible because of you allowing a true independent sports media enterprise to thrive unlike any other in the business. So please subscribe to the All In Package to continue to make all this possible, to ensure that all of our stats, information, data, content is available to you, especially you, the people that get the site and get the show.